Oh, just about. When I found out that I could take a class over, that was brilliant. That was beauty. I had no idea I could take classes over. I took calculus 7 times.
Oh my. ADHD Rewired, episode 107. This is the show designed to help those of us who have really good intentions and a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and consultant. We know that starting can be the hardest part, so let's get started. But first, let me thank our sponsors. This podcast is brought to you by Audible and TomNardone.net. Have you read Brené Brown's newest book, Rising Strong? Let me tell you, I've been there. You've been there. All of us have been there at some point. We dared greatly and failed. Been hurt, disappointed, rejected. It's the struggle. To me, Rising Strong is a call to action. It is the message that says if I'm going to do meaningful work, if I'm going to dare greatly and put myself out there again and again, I am going to fail. I am now listening to Rising Strong for a second time. I'm leaning in even more this time and finding more strength and courage that sometimes I forget that I have. Get this book read by Brené Brown for free on Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for a free download and a 30-day free trial. That's audibletrial.com/ADHD Rewired for your free audiobook download. And while we are on the topic of books, have you picked up your copy of Chasing Kites by Tom Nardone? Every person who I've spoken to about this book describes almost a grief process of this book coming to an end. Yes, it's actually that good. Go to tomnardone.net and get a copy. Do it. tomnardone.net. You're going to love this book. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Rewired. I am here in the virtual ADHD Rewired studios with my guest, Cameron Gott, who is a professional certified coach. He coaches creative and resourceful entrepreneurs and leaders nationwide to help them create the focus they want and the follow-through they need. He's a mentor coach and also an instructor at both Coach Approach for Organizers.com and Atka.com. Cameron, welcome to ADHD Rewired.
Eric, it's really great to be here. So it's a real treat. Thank you.
So where do you want to begin your story? Because I know that when you reached out to me with interest for being on this show, one of the things that you said is that you really want to share kind of the story that you have about articulating ADHD. Would that be a good place to start?
Certainly. I think it's something that has impacted my life. And so I think sharing my own story about that might be able to help others. I think the significance or importance of being able to articulate one's experience. Awareness is so impacted by ADD. Mm-hmm. And so getting that accurate read is so important to that self-knowledge, because I feel that self-knowledge is really, it's number one in fighting the negative impact of ADD.
I think that's self-knowledge is, I think, the most important piece of knowledge we as just human beings can have.
Right, absolutely. I think that the whole idea of metacognition, I've heard it quoted that half the people in the world don't think about thinking.
That's scary and not surprising all at the same time.
Right. So I think about my life. And, there was a period where that certainly was the case for me, because it was so easy for me to just slip into my dream state. I was diagnosed with inattentive ADD. And so that sort of ability just to slip out of the present and into some rich,
a world of imagination. And
oh my goodness, it was much more enticing than what the teacher was putting up on the board at that moment. So, I was not diagnosed, early on because I was not a problem. I would sit there, and I was the kid. The teachers loved me, they just, because I was kind and gentle, a gentle giant. I was the biggest kid in the class.
Really?
Oh yeah, I was about 6'6", and 6'6" now. But I was always a head above everyone else. I was sort of the spacey dorky kid, who tried to
that
succeed.
Would describe me pretty accurately.
Oh, yeah. So anyway, it was well after my diagnosis that I sort of stumbled upon this whole notion of articulating ADD.
Well, tell me about your diagnosis. How old were you when you were diagnosed?
So I was working at a small Quaker school in North Carolina, and we had an in-service with a gentleman from UNC named David Parker, who was a learning specialist there. And he came out and was doing an in-service on ADD and kids of special needs, but the focus was ADD. And he put actually the retreat, our place was such that the school was such that we would do retreats at teachers' houses. And actually the retreat was in my living room. And I remember sitting in the middle of my living room, and he put a shot on the screen, and it had two types of ADD. And I knew about the hyperactive.
Right. ADD. That's what most people think of when they think of ADHD, is the hyperactive impulsive boy, typically.
Right. And and I knew that well because when I was a teacher in Baltimore, I would take kids on trips down to North Carolina for this outdoor leadership program. And it was during the summer, and I remember parents would give their kids vacations.
Lucky for you.
Lucky for me. And they put them in these two kids would get in the back of the van, and they sang over and over this one song all the way down to North Carolina for 14 hours.
And what was that song?
It was the da 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 da.
Oh my God! The entire way.
We'd say, "Did you do what we asked you to do?" Yes, 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 yes.
The entire way.
The entire way, and no, and it just was. And you couldn't reason with them, and we couldn't dump them off at a rest stop. So we had to figure out how to work with them. So that was my experience of ADD, is very energetic, very enthusiastic, very pervasive children. And these guys were lovable. They were absolutely, you couldn't not like them. I mean, they were funny. So, but also trying at times. So I'm sitting a couple of years later, I'm sitting here, and David Parker puts up this slide of the one I knew, and then the one I didn't know. And as I'm reading down that, the 9 different characteristics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was like, I sat there and blurted to everyone. I was like, oh my God, there I am. That's me. That's me. And
so you're there as a teacher, and he had this like, oh my God moment.
Right. So, and in that moment, I realized, all this understanding and self-knowledge, right, came crashing through the door. But it was also just the beginning, because that was when I was 28, and that's 22 years ago. I'm 50 now. And I think that, I've had lots of opportunities to articulate ADD over the years, and
so that was the first time it was articulated to you. And
right.
Then you, this kind of self-awareness, self-knowledge was completely reframed for you. at this day, and it was at your home, right? During this.
It was in my house. Yeah, it was really interesting how I was a first year student. I remember, someone was like, "We got to have a retreat. Who's going to hold it?" And no one put their hand up.
so count on the ADHD to be like, "Oh, I'll do it." What did I just sign up for?
Yeah, but that same school is where we had there were no grades.
Yeah, tell me about what. So you mentioned this is a Quaker school.
Right, it's a Quaker school.
What is that like? Because I could only imagine. So give us a kind of a paint us a picture of what that means.
Okay,
because I'm just picturing a guy on the oatmeal cover.
Of course, with the black brass buckles.
Right, exactly.
Shoes, yeah. So it's a different kind of Quaker school. So when people think about Quaker schools or Friends schools, they often think of these old schools that were established in the late 1700s in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Baltimore area.
Okay.
So most of them have sort of moved away from the Quaker meeting and have become basically prep schools.
Okay. So, what does that mean, the Quaker meeting? It's just an interesting kind of knowledge gap that I have. Sure.
So Quakers, came out of Pennsylvania with, now we're looking at, someone's going to say, no, that's not all right, Cam. I want to say William Penn, but someone's going to say, geez, you're a Quaker, Cam. So Quakers believe that God is pretty much in everything and everywhere. And the meeting is, instead of a church service where someone is up in the pulpit, Quaker meeting is where you sit in a round, and it's really about silence.
Okay.
So they have their tenets, or principles that are great to live by. The truth is always revealed, to shine the light and goodness on others. They tend to be pacifists, anti-war, often is the case. Quakers were those few white guys that marched with Martin Luther King in 1968. Many of them were Quakers. So they tend to be activists. And I went to a Quaker school in Baltimore. I got in. At that time it was a prep school, Friends School of Baltimore. I got in on the coattails of my sister, who is a retinal surgeon out in Montana. We joke, we talk in our family that we have an MD and 2 ADDs. That's who we have. So, so I didn't have to take the test. And if I imagine if I had to take the test, I wouldn't have gotten in. I'm pretty certain that I kind of bumped along. And we go up and we do our Quaker meeting once a week, and we sit in silence and throw spitballs at everyone, And then there's a strong sense of service with Quaker communities, mm-hmm. and so that's very big in Quaker schools. A sense of service, and then really the difference between the one down in North Carolina where I taught was it was really teaching the whole child. So this comes back to this no grades notion, and the fact that as a teacher, I had to comment on the academic progress of a child, the academic, spiritual, social, physical, and there's one more that I'm missing here. But again, that sort of whole picture of the child, that we nurture and educate the whole child.
So not just how well did they take a test.
Right. And so it wasn't, I had to take now I was a math and science teacher and an outdoor education teacher. And we had to, I would give tests, of course, and take all those grades that I had from quizzes and tests, which, by the way, were sitting on my counter, not graded until 2 days before the end of the trimester.
I don't know if I've ever met a teacher with ADHD who has not described their grading process to be very much like that.
Right. So, and my first year, my first grading period, I was actually in a car accident that knocked me out
Oh man.
during that period. So I was out of school for a week. I come back, and they're like, and Quakers are lovely. I mean, they're just lovely people, and they're like, whenever you want to get it to us, and
Which is the worst kind of deadline for someone with ADHD.
it is the worst kind of deadline. Well, this is before I knew I had ADD, right? I mean, I'm still not sure what's going on. And so, meanwhile, the second trimester has started already, right? So I'm back teaching, and I'm trying to collate, organize, synthesize, and then for 80 children, trying to take this information and write a glowing narrative, page-long narrative on
For 80 children.
For 80 kids. And also, I was never a competent or a capable writer. So
I feel your pain beyond like belief. I mean, it's So how did you get through that?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, I slogged my way through that, and it's sort of, again, it's that with ADD, it's the recognizing there's a challenge, but not really doing anything about it. It's like being with the struggle over and over. And I worked there 6 years, so that was 18 different experiences of this end of term trimesters, right? 3 times a year. So I had 18 times to get better at it. When I got my diagnosis and I started taking medication, that certainly helped. It certainly helped with the ability to stay on task, to stay focused, to stay.
So how long was it between you having this meeting in your house where you're reading the 9 symptoms of inattentive, what they probably called then the inattentive type of ADHD,
right?
And you had this, that's me. What was the kind of time frame and kind of steps between that moment and actually getting a diagnosis where you're beginning to actually get the benefits of treatment from medication?
Well, that's a great question. And that's sort of that foggy history that I imagine it was within a year.
Okay.
I'm sure it wasn't the next day. In my mind, it sort of felt like the next day. But knowing me, that I was like, okay, I got ADD, and I got to schedule that, meeting. I got to go get diagnosed, right? Right? You get it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny too because I think back to my story of my diagnosis when I had this. And I talked about it on the very first episode of the podcast, where I had this kind of chance meeting with this girl in college who I still do not remember who it was. I so wish I did so I could thank her because It was that information that really changed the course of everything. And I went that next day and made an appointment for an evaluation, which was so profoundly unlike me that because I knew that I think I just found the key to everything that I was struggling with, and I knew if I did not unlock this door, that I was going to be there's no way I was going to be able to continue with college because I was already on a second chance that I really should not have been given. So
she hit you with a 2x4, right? Right. Sometimes it takes that.
Yeah, it was. I almost failed out of school, and I was able to get one more chance at school despite having atrocious grades 2 semesters in a row.
Oh, I can beat you there, brother.
Bring it, Cameron. What you got?
It was the really interesting thing. I was thinking about this prior to our conversation today. I kind of insulated myself. I think the good thing about working at Carolina Friends School was the people around me at first were extremely intimidating because of just who they were. It was sort of like these Renaissance people with all these advanced degrees, and they were Peace Corps and these amazing accomplishments and all before age 30. And there's sort of this, that was the first time I really noticed that expectation gap. It was like here, and that really was difficult for me. I was thinking, when are they going to find me out? The fraud that I am, I shouldn't be here because I don't belong. And so at school, I really insulated myself by, hanging out with people who had similar expectations. I hung out with a group that basically 3/4 of them were gone within 2 years. I was at the University of Maryland. I didn't get into any schools that I wanted to get into. Maryland back then, Maryland now is a great school. Maryland in 1983 was a complete backup school. And I remember sitting there with the gentleman, and he had a ruler, and he put it across, and it was like the grade point average on one side and SAT on the other. And he just took he was like, yeah, you barely got in, buddy. And he's like, reaches over, congratulations, you're in. So I was there 6 years.
Okay. It took me 5, but
well, I was a year away skiing when I realized it's like the 1.3 GPA.
You did worse than I did
for the 4th time.
Wait, 1.3 for the 4th time?
Oh, just about. When I found out that I could take a class over, that was brilliant. That was beauty. I had no idea I could take classes over. I took calculus 7 times.
You won. Oh my. That's that's somewhere between persistence and torture, I think.
Yeah. So calculus, it was I was a geology major, right? And going out in the field, I got an A in all the field work, right? Because I had that spatial ability to see the geology, right, and how it just went underground. I could see it where others couldn't. That high associative ability,
Yeah.
And then in the lab, where they give you 35 green minerals and say, you need to identify these, and you need to go through a systematic process to identify them. And oh, by the way, you're on your own for the next 16 weeks. Would kill me. Would absolutely kill. So, and I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Where were we?
Geology, calculus 7 times.
Oh, thank you. Yes, calculus.
We win. We got the train back on the tracks.
Right. So the calculus was the engineering calculus we had to take, which I really didn't understand why. But there was a 2-semester course, and I took the first semester. I took it 4 times. I had to get the dean's approval for the 4th time I took it. I finally got it. And I remember sitting in her office, and I must have done the puppy eyes or something, because she kind of smiled and was like, okay, all righty. So the other thing, Eric, is really funny is that my mom, who's much like me, I'm not going to say she's ADD, but the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. The fact that Maryland was $666 a semester allowed me to keep going there. It was like, well, you know what? It's only $666. So, okay. So I kind of kept going, and it was basically just surviving each semester.
Not per class, per semester.
Yes, $666 bucks. It was in state. This is back in, now that was 83.
That was back when anyone can really afford college.
That's right. I've got 2 kids, and I'm not looking forward to that whole process in 5 years.
I am hoping, as just a sidebar, that if you have young kids today, that by the time they are in college, because there's no way it's sustainable. And I think that we are in a college kind of bubble, and I think similar to the housing bubble. I think it's going to pop.
I hope it pops.
So I hope it pops too, because it's absurd. It's absurd.
It is.
All right, continue.
Completely.
So stepping off my soapbox here.
Sure. So I guess are we going back to?
So I derailed the train this time.
Where are we?
We are wherever we want to be. So I think we were talking about the cost of school. You were able to keep going because the cost of school was $666.
Right. And I would say that the reason I did graduate with a degree was because I found a little group of people on a giant campus, and these amazing professors who I started to make a connection with, right? When I was sitting in that calculus class with 400 kids, I couldn't make that connection with the individual. And in the geology programs, this tiny little building nestled in between these massive, huge brick coliseums of the engineering program and computer science and business. And the little geology program was right there. And they really took an interest in you. There were real characters, interesting people, and that sort of got me engaged. It was sort of like I was like, I like these people, and they like me, and that kind of started to fill, that sense of self-worth, which wasn't there, started to fill, and I started to believe, maybe I can do this, because all during that time, I really didn't think I was going to, I didn't think I was going to graduate. I really didn't have that belief that it was a possibility. So until, the last maybe year 3.5, year 4.
do you ever have that dream that you get like the call or the letter from your college and say, oh, we just realized there was an error in the records, and we need to take back your degree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, and I remember going through some old stuff, and I know what it was. It was some program where years later, I was looking at a advanced degree at Johns Hopkins in their continuing education program or something, and they wanted my college transcript. And the college transcript, where there's withdrawals or Fs, what they would do is, it was that old kind of mimeograph, that awful dot matrix printer.
Uh-huh.
And they'd have like 7 or 8 asterisks on either side. So it was like a black page because it had these asterisks all over it, and it was like this, just where most people had one left column, I had a left and a right column full of ink.
Did your mission statement say, Cameron Gott, the most persistent person you will meet?
Well, that's kind of nice. So it's a nice way to look at it. Thank you.
As a social worker, we're I think we're either trained or naturally kind of wired to see the strengths in any opportunity, in any situation. And so I would look at someone who did calculus 7 times as, how can that not be a persistent person?
Well, I think that, as I was listening to one of your podcasts and one of your interviews, and I've heard this before, where you hear the storyline of someone. Well, I got diagnosed, a couple of years ago, and now I'm, doing this, and this, right? This sort of lots of success is happening, and it seems like it's a compressed amount of time. And for me, I was diagnosed probably. What was that? Mid 90s. That was 22 years ago, and I didn't really start to enjoy success. Really enjoying what I was doing, feeling good about my contribution, until probably 10 years ago. So it's been a process, and it still is a process.
So when did you? So you went and got your certification as a coach. And now you coach leaders. When did you kind of go through that process?
So I started working. I was at the school that I was working at. I learned about my own ADD. I went and got my diagnosis. I hired a coach who, the coaches were very new at that time, and one of my former students was taking care of my dog. She'd graduated and she was just a great kid and would take care of our dog. I remember she was coming over to the house, and I looked in the back of her car, and she had this the old Kate Kelly, Peggy Raimondo book. You Mean I'm Not Lazy, Stupid, Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got this bright yellow color on it back then. I was like, what do you got that? What's that back there for? She's like, well, that's my mom's. And I'm like, what's your mom doing with it? You know, and it turns out she's working over at Duke in their student assistant program. And she, by herself, started to do some coach training. So I started talking with her, and I hired her to help me do those damnable end of term projects. And that was the smartest thing I ever did, Eric. That's the smartest thing, to sit there and have this person help me just go through and, just without judgment, without telling. We sat there and we just started to organize and create this process for getting through this thing where I got to be successful, right? I had 18 times. I didn't know it at the time, but I got, I had a chance to that iterative process, right? Of learning as you go.
Yep.
So that was my kind of first experience with coaching. The other funny thing that happened was I started to attract certain students into my advisee group. So again, this is about the kids, giving them responsibility and ownership. And so they select their advisors. And the advisee groups was a really important part of the school. We would take trips together. We'd go off campus into Chapel Hill and Durham together. And I noticed that there was a certain kind of kid who was selecting me, and they were very similar to me. They kind of had the random thinking personality, just like random thoughts and laughing. We had great fun, but I always had the teachers coming up to me and said, your kid is driving me crazy because they're so capable and yet they can't give me what I want from them right at this period of time. So I was sort of putting things together, and actually, this was going all along during my process of learning about ADD for myself. So these kids are coming in. I'm getting my diagnosis. I'm getting coached by an ADD coach. And I sort of was like, and I was also realizing I'm not going to be here for the long term. I just didn't seem, there were some, what I called teacher, we called them teacher monks. The people who were just absolutely committed, and they lived there and they just lived and breathed. And I, God bless them. Right. I mean, I have nothing against them, but they had this, this amazing ability to teach and manage, right? Good managers. I realized that a good teacher needs to be a good manager. And I wasn't a very good manager. And when you say a teacher, you mean like an actual, in academia? In academia, in high school and professor, where you're having to manage all these relationships, to manage the paperwork, the process of assigning projects and homework and collecting, getting it back on the right time, and that was just a brutal process for me.
I remember, anytime I had to write papers for even in high school, I was always just amazed, like, oh my gosh, they have to go and grade all of these, and they're telling us they're going to get them back to us by Monday. To me, I'm like, how do they, they must have hired help. It's to me, that was amazing.
Right. And so for me, it was lots of late nights and a lot of, ugly looks from my wife. You give too much to that school. So that's when I started to realize that coaching, I started to naturally kind of, as I was advising these kids, in a way I was coaching them.
Mm-hmm.
I realized that telling them tutoring was not working. And that's what David Parker found out at UNC, that tutoring kids with ADD didn't really work. You give them information, they go off, they come back, and they've forgotten the information.
Mm-hmm.
But that action learning model of setting them up for success of what do you want to do? And then that positive accountability to support them on the other side, to have them engaged and to start to build that self-knowledge. Right?
Cameron, here's what I want to do real quickly, because it sounds like you're about to go in deep to something that sounds really rich and valuable from just the information standpoint. So what I want to do is take a quick break, and then when we come back, I want to talk about this model that you're referring to. I think you refer to it as the AEC model, which I have no idea what that even stands for. So you'll tell us that when we come back. Andrew Acre is an ADHD coach.
I think good coaching and whatever is all about like just knowing sort of where the person is at and what they're ready for and what they're looking for.
That's Andrew. As I mentioned, he's a coach. He's also a member of the ADHD Rewired Coaching and Accountability Group.
And I think that like one of the things that I feel like you've heard in my voice as we've gone along is like, yeah, you can go further here.
Let me give you some context here. Andrew is working on blogging, and so he is creating a kind of a blog schedule for himself to consistently create content.
And you want to go further here, and you want me to tell you you can go further here. It's like that. You've done that like 3 times at least so far. So I'm thankful for each occasion. Earlier this week, when I was talking about the writing thing, you were just like, you were talking to me about outlining and talking to me about the planning process, asking me questions about what I was doing there. And, I was pretty vague and I was pretty comfortable. And there were some things that, I felt pretty secure and confident about. And I do feel secure and confident about those things in terms of like how I'm putting together the content and what my theme is and stuff like that. But it was just like, you were asking me to be like maybe a little bit more specific. Maybe you can think down, when are you going to do that? How many words? All that stuff. And like, I hadn't really asked myself those questions. It was a push that I was looking for. So it was great.
I'll be the first one to admit that even I know what to do and don't always do what I know. That's why I work with a coach, and I think it's awesome that Andrew and many others who have gone through this program are also coaches.
But yeah, you're totally right in terms of like the planning with the end in mind thing. And part of my resistance that was like, but I already know that, like I do that, it's like I'm a coach, and it's like, sometimes that stuff that we think, it's the stuff we think we're good on. And then somebody else comes along who's like, really? You think you're good on that? Maybe you could push that a little bit more.
Andrew and I were then talking about how much we both love kind of exploring and increasing self-awareness, because we can't change those things that we're not aware of.
Dude, I've got to tell you, I am here for the mirror, 100%. That is what I want. That is what I signed up for. And it's being delivered so far. So thank you. Kudos to you and the rest of the group members for, letting me see that mirror, man.
That was Andrew Acre, ADHD coach. You will probably be hearing more from him in upcoming episodes. Make this the summer you get your ADHD rewired. Be one of the first to register for this summer's session. Want to save $400? Register before March 31st and you can, if you are one of the first 6 people to register. You can join this group for less than $167 a month. To learn more, go to coachingrewired.com and schedule your free screening today. Next session begins May 23rd. Join us 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Central every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Go to coachingrewired.com for more information, including time zone conversions. That's coachingrewired.com, and prepare to get your ADHD rewired. We are back with Cameron Gott. And what I want to talk to Cameron about now after the break here is, one of the things that you have done is at Coach Approach is you developed some courses and some curriculum and you do something called fostering mindful change. So I wanted to find out about that, as well as a model that you created, the AEC model. So I was wondering if you can kind of share with us both of those things. So the fostering mindful change and the AEC model.
Sure. So I think it makes sense to start with the AEC model.
I was thinking that too.
Yeah, the AEC is a model that I developed with Denslow Brown for our advanced ADD coach training program. And it really came out of my experience of with around the C part, which is completion. So about 10 years after my diagnosis, I had this was my second big event in learning. So the first big event was the diagnosis, and then 10 years later, maybe 9 years later, was this sort of second big event of, and this is this notion of articulating ADD, sort of the true impact for me when I left the teaching position and sort of put my shingle out as a coach. I was really struggling. I was working another job, but I was kind of, I think, timid in my commitment, putting it out there. I would do that 90% thing of, work to 90%, and then, this looks good, right? I mean, it's that creative, divergent brain style where you get something within 10% of completion, and then you move on. And it was pointed out to me by my wife in such a delicate way that I wasn't really making things happen. And she just said, look at the bank account, brother. And
you've all these really great ideas, and I see a lot of progress, but we got to get to the finish line here.
You know what? It's so interesting you say it that way, because that's exactly how she said it. So.
And I swear I haven't spoken with her.
Yeah. So she had this delicate way of letting me know that, hey, it looks good what you're doing, but it's not bringing home the bacon. And so that's when it sort of, this whole notion of how ADD really impacted me personally was this notion of not completing projects, not completing actions, but even to a more of a molecular or granular scale of not completing thoughts, right? To engage to a point and then go off. This whole notion of a tangent. And so I knew about tangents. I knew about distractibility. I knew about impatience. But this whole thing about how completion was my bane, it was my Achilles heel, and the lack of it. So that's how this AEC model came about, was, in order to complete, you have to engage to a certain point and then disengage. And I think that I find that ADD is that it's around that. It's the transmission, right? It's not the engine; it's the gearbox.
Yeah,
we tend to be in neutral or fifth gear.
Oh man, I often describe myself as being stuck in neutral. It's like the engine's revving, I'm stepping on the gas, so you hear a lot of but I ain't going anywhere. So that's just, it's the thinking of all the things you need to do, but no action's taking place.
Right. So AEC is basically, it's a model based on awareness. So
what does that stand for? Yeah. Okay. Awareness.
So A is awareness, E is engagement, and C is completion. And I think that where I began and where I invite others to begin is really come back. If you don't have good completion, if you don't have good engagement, you can always fall back to good awareness. And so paying attention and trying to be mindful of the present learning opportunity. For me, the present was always like a lightning bug that I couldn't catch.
I love that.
Yeah. But then, how relative bodies, as to me, it was the present moving around me. I realized it was actually, the present was just there. And it was me, zipping I was the lightning bug, right? I couldn't slow down, the brain slow down and just sort of be in that present moment. I'd be in my thoughts into this vivid, either hopeful or scary future, or regrets about, decisions I made in the past.
When it comes to completion, I think this is a David Allen quote, although I could be wrong, because I reserve that right to be wrong. The idea of it's not that we have too many things on our plate, is that we have too many things incomplete.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of David Allen, and a lot of people with ADD love David Allen, but then have a hard time making his stuff happen.
One of my critiques of his, I like his stuff too, because theoretically I really like a lot of the process stuff he has. I think one of the challenges I see for people with ADHD with his kind of approach is that it assumes an intact working memory. And I think that's one of the challenges that's underlying in his approach, is that it has the assumption that you can remember that thought for a moment.
Right.
And we know that that's not accurate with ADHD.
Right. And there's also just a lot to manage there. I always had a hard time with the tickler file.
I don't do the tickler file.
And just managing that tickler file. That was too much for me. So AAC is what I use in my teaching students. And it's also something I use with all my clients, is really we start with they're coming for engagement. They're coming for results. And what I want to do is, hey, let's come back and let's start with awareness, build that, and then we'll move into engagement is really practice, right? It's that practicing to develop those habits. And then completion is something we're working toward, is what is that meaningful completion? What are those things you want to complete? And then what are those things you want to let go of?
So give us some specific ways that you help, both that you help the clients that you work with completion and follow through. And additionally, how do you teach those things?
Teaching to students?
Teaching to students the specific area of completion. Yeah.
So I think it's tougher for students than it is for my clients, because for my clients, let me back up to the first question about what I do with my clients. So often my clients come with, they've got a lot to do. They're often moved to a point of, I'll just say despair, in the sense of a lot of frustration. They don't typically fit into, when we think about people with ADD, when they look at that, they don't see themselves, because they're college graduates. They've had some success, but typically that success comes at a great cost. Lots of time on task, a lot of challenges around work-life balance. And so they come to me and they realize, I've been doing this, but it's really, I can't keep it going at this rate. So I've got to find a different way. So I think that I find that one of the two best areas of exploration is in resources. Again, developing awareness of resources is people and process. Process is much like time. We think of how time is so challenging for people with ADD to understand. Time is a process. Processes.
So give us a process. Give us a specific kind of kind of from the tactical level. How do you either yourself manage time and time challenges, or help your clients? Maybe you can share a specific strategy that you're helping a client with.
Sure. So I think that if you're familiar with, I'm sure you're familiar with Covey's Quadrant 2 areas, and I think that
so those important, not urgent.
Important, not urgent. And my clients often, they're very good at the urgent.
Right, because fires get our attention.
Fires get our attention. And they often wait for the Q2 to move to a Q1. But there are many Q2s that don't happen, right? It's those things that are only important to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other people don't care about a person's Q2, right? They just want you to do your job and then go home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helping them find an entry point or accessibility to those Q2. And we do it through developing an awareness of what they are and what they're not, right? Roles and responsibilities that they want, and roles and responsibilities that they want to shed. And then regular time on task in those areas. But as they're doing that, again, it's a very much of experiential. This goes back to my experiential training as an outdoor education leader, to letting the experience teach us, right? I'm not teaching. We develop the engagement,
right?
And then we create new awareness from that engagement. And I never, I used to tell people what completion was. I don't do it anymore. Because my clients have this amazing ability to create their own definition of what is completion for them. And so I just kind of I've let go of that. Yes, there's a model and there's, it says what completion is. But there's a very much of a creative process to discovering that for the individual.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these people, I liken doing things to like moving tasks, right? I use a lot of metaphor and analogy, and so it's like moving melons, and the people that I work with tend to have a melon patch that's just overgrown, and there are just these massive melons. Some are rotting. People are handing them melons left and right, and it's being able to find ways to move those melons in a way, right? Well, in order to do the things that they want to do, right, those Q2 things, they can't do it alone. They have to influence or encourage others, to articulate the desire to move that melon. They have to enroll others to help them do that. And so it's this leadership piece I find is very underdeveloped in them, because these are doers, right? And they see themselves as doers, and they're only as good as the last melon they moved, right? So it's like they pick up the melon, they run. They pick up the melon, they run. But they've noticed when they come to me, they got these melons, all scattered along the highway, lots broken, a lot discarded.
So they're coming to you as a big mess, basically.
Often, again, these people are like me. They have a high capacity for pain.
Okay.
Right? I mean, the perseverance is strong in them. And so they take a lot. You could call it stubborn. But that tends to be a quality in ADD, I think, too.
Like, I'm going to do it despite everything else.
Sure. Right. And so, you can, people can be, what I notice applying the AEC model is people tend to be either too far in awareness, right? They're kind of the Buddha sitting in the wheat field.
Right. And probably not doing anything about it, though.
And not engaging enough. Or they're the bull in the china shop where they engage, but they don't have that awareness.
You know what I like about the engagement versus kind of action is it feels sort of like an invitation to engage versus like a direction to do. And I think from as a person with ADHD, I am much more inclined to accept the invitation than I am to follow the direction.
Yeah. You don't push here, man. We know not to push. Right. And that's what I've learned is you don't push.
And that's, when you're working, I don't know if you help people with mindfulness, if you're ever kind of guiding someone through a mindful exercise, you always, and what I do is I invite people to, do X, Y, or Z while doing a kind of a meditation exercise versus like directing. It's like,
absolutely.
You can, I'd like to invite you to, take that breath and really pay attention to how it feels on your nose, or you can just breathe naturally. It's kind of give that you can if you want to. You don't have to. You get that kind of that increased engagement in the desired activity.
Right, because pushing doesn't work.
That's right.
Right, pushing creates a pressure, and that's why they're here, is to develop their own pusher, right? Their own motivation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I like working with really creative, smart people, is to let them have that discovery process. But then it's that persistent bringing it back around. It's remembering to remind the brain of, remember, these are the things you said were important, and we are going to come back to this, right? The other thing that, again, it's that people come with this urgency to change.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helping them to not embrace that, to let go of that urgency, to change their results that they're having within 2 weeks. It's 47 years that got you here, right? They're 47 years of
right.
It's not going to turn around in 2 weeks, friend, right?
Right.
So anyway, I've had a lot of fun with that, and that whole AEC process, that was kind of the fun part that happened for me, Eric, was when I went from teaching to coaching, I wasn't teaching anymore. And then when I got back into training, guess what? I got to do the coaching and the teaching together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been like the funnest part, is being able to bring that coaching, the training back, or the teaching back. But guess what? I don't have those 80 things. I don't have that massive paperwork.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah. So it's sort of, doing things on my terms that works for me, getting clear on what works for me. And so that works really well.
Well, let me ask you, we're going to wrap this up here in just a minute. Now, I know that you had mentioned before that you have a lot of analogies, and I love analogies because I think it helps us connect with just ways of thinking that are really kind of strong and allows us to kind of tap into a deeper level of understanding. It can be completely related or unrelated to these specifics of this conversation. But what are some of your favorite analogies when you're explaining any area of ADHD or a process related to what you're helping your clients with?
Good question. And so I've got, I don't know if it's not enough coming up or too many coming up, and I can't sort them out.
I can so relate to that. And as I was asking that, I had the thought of, man, I'm just glad that I'm not asking me that question, because I would hate that question.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So there's two, and one in particular is taking that melon analogy, and the one I like that I think resonates with people is you've got your melon patch, and it's typically overgrown. The fence around that melon patch is in disrepair, right? Because there's people coming in. It's not that people are coming in and taking melons. It's usually they're adding melons, right? It's that too many ideas, not enough action. Now, imagine this, Eric. There's a 10-story apartment building next to that melon patch. Got it?
Okay.
There's a door right next to that melon patch. So if you open that door and you look up, there's a stairway that goes to the top floor. All right. Okay. This is a different kind of stairway, though. So there's something missing. And this is the ADD experience. So the idea is to take them, in order to complete a project, you pick a melon, you get it, and you take it up 10 flights to the top of the roof, right, to the rooftop. That's completion, right? Excuse me, that's finishing the job. What's missing in the ADD experience is the landing. There are no landings. So imagine what happens is you pick up a melon, you start to carry it. And as you're going up, someone hands you another melon, right? How many melons can you hold, right? You start to drop melons. And if you don't have a landing, a melon on a stair is not good, right? It doesn't work. So we drop them, we forget them, they drop off, they break. So something I do with my clients early on is to identify, where are those landings, right? Can we, instead of trying to sprint those melons, from the melon patch to the rooftop, is can we place them, right? So those landings are actually visual representations
like
of
checkpoints.
And completion.
Okay.
That's completion for me, is the landing of setting it down and knowing where it is so you can come back to it.
Now, as somebody with ADHD, my very first thought, because I was closing my eyes to really try to get into this analogy with you. My first thought was, why would I pick a 10-story building without an elevator? So looking at it from a systems approach, I'm like, we picked the wrong building here.
That's right. Like, where's the app for that, man?
Now I'm trying to think, okay, quick, we create a pulley system because that would seem a lot more efficient. It's how do we lessen the painful process of how do we get front and focus on system development so we're not just working so hard.
Right. And so I think system development starts with, finding natural landings.
Yeah, I could see
and
that.
realizing that I think that again, it's that whole, the stepping stones in the river, right? It's the identifying those places to pause, and a completion point is actually a place to develop new awareness, right? To pause and disengage and take a look around. What's going on, right? And then move forward. Or leave that melon and go get another one.
So as you're maybe sitting here listening to the podcast, enjoying maybe a delicious bowl of a melon, we are finding this completion point right here, right now. And to develop a greater sense of awareness, Cameron, where can people learn more about you? I know you have a blog, so if you can leave people with kind of your contact information, that would be great.
Okay, Eric, thank you. It's been a real pleasure talking with you. It's a lot of fun to go over this stuff with you. My website, where my blog is CameronGott.com. I think that's pretty good.
And that's 2 G's, CameronGott.
Right.
.com. T for time? I don't know.
There you go. 2 T's.
And as always, the links of everything we mentioned during this episode will be in the show notes page for this episode on ADHDrewired.com. Cameron, thank you so much for spending the hour with me. And I know that you are joining us with a little bit of a cold, so I want to tell you to feel better.
Oh, I will. I'm trying. So thank you, Eric. It's been great. A lot of fun.
Thanks so much. Thank you for listening to another episode of ADHD Rewired. And if you're new to the show, welcome to ADHD Rewired. We are more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. You can see a full outline of this and all other episodes with all the links and other resources mentioned during this interview at ADHDrewired.com. Help support this podcast by checking out my sponsors. I use Zoom video conferencing nearly every day, and so can you. Go free or go pro. But please, go to erictivers.com/Zoom so they know that I sent you. And you can get a free audiobook from Audible at erictivers.com/Audible. And next time you shop Amazon, use the Amazon search portal at ADHDrewired.com. A small percentage of your purchase will go to support this show, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. You can also support this podcast by leaving an honest rating and review in iTunes or Stitcher. This really helps other people find this show. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Don't just be a passive listener, be an active member of the ADHD Rewired community. We are on Facebook. You can like our page, but please submit your request to join our free and growing community. And don't forget to check your other inbox because I screen everybody before they come into our community.
Looking for a coach? If you're still listening at this point and you answered yes, come to my website at ADHDrewired.com and schedule your free 20-minute consultation, or call me at 224-993-9450. Is your school, business, or organization hiring speakers? I provide fun and engaging presentations full of practical solutions that both educate and entertain. Hire me for your next professional development day or corporate training event. Go to ADHDrewired.com/talks. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next week.